Well, hello, and thanks for coming to my virtual reading. This is being recorded and will be posted to YouTube. So I've muted your sound and shut off your video for your privacy. Please use your chat if you have any questions or comments as we go. I'm Tim Covell. I'm a technical writer by day and a romance writer by night. I also write poetry and other things, fiction and nonfiction, and I run Somewhat Grumpy Press, a small publishing company. For more information about me, check my website, Covell, Covell.ca, and the Somewhat Grumpy Press website, sgpress.ca. This reading is supported by the Canada Council for the Arts and the Writers' Union of Canada. And thanks to Romance Writers of Atlantic Canada for providing the Zoom meeting. Ocean's Lure, my first romance novel, was published by Somewhat Grumpy Press in 2021. I'm very grateful to the Somewhat Grumpy Press founder, D.A. Brown, for agreeing it could be the second book published by the company that she founded. If you're not familiar with the story, here's the cover blurb. Now, blurbs are very hard, so a big thank you to Donna Alward, who helped me with this. Mariana Bergson's Cape Breton campground is struggling to survive, and the end of season arrival of any customer is welcome. When an attractive businessman shows up for a few days of rest and relaxation, Mariana appreciates the distraction. A few days and nights with Dylan Felder could be a pleasant vacation. Dylan is ready to leave a shady loan company and start his own legitimate business. He just needs to finish one last crooked deal and he'll be set. And how difficult can a few days of camping be, especially as the scenery is so beautiful and he's not just admiring the rugged Cape Breton shore. When a washed out road strands Mariana and Dylan together without phones or electricity, secrets old and new have them fighting their growing attraction. But Dylan's plans mean Mariana risks losing her land and her heart. In terms of tropes, we've got secret identity, which, when revealed, becomes enemies to lovers. Dylan doesn't tell Mariana why he's there, which is to gather information that will allow his company to seize her land. So he's a villain, but I picture him almost as the melodramatic, dastardly, whippish, evil banker type. In the old movies, he's the one that held the mortgage on the heroine's farm, tied her to the railroad tracks, twirls his mustache, and says, "Curses foiled again." And like a lot of these villains, he's ultimately harmless. And we've got Stranded Together, a great way to do the forced proximity that romance novels often require. Readers don't have time or for the couple to date for 6 months, and that really wouldn't make for a very interesting story. So here's an excerpt. To set the scene, there have been several days of heavy rain. The campground has lost power, so Mariana and Dylan drive along the mountainous road to Bay St. Lawrence to check if a power line is down. They find the downed line, but as they look, a portion of the road collapses. They escape unharmed, but Dylan's truck is washed away. Now the couple are walking back to the campground, several kilometers, in heavy rain. They crested another hill. "Almost there," said Mariana. "The campground is over the next hill. I'm looking forward to dry clothing." "Me too, or I would if I had anything to change into." "Don't worry about that. I have clothes for you." Dylan glanced at Mariana. She was shapeless in her rain gear, but he'd seen the curves. He knew it was hiding. She also came up to his chin. "I don't think I'll fit your clothes." "My clothing library, remember? It's not just coats." "You'd be surprised what people leave behind. You won't go naked unless you want to." Dylan was unsure how to respond to that. "But I wouldn't recommend it. Mosquitoes." They walked the last section of the road and through the waterlogged campground in silence. In the open area, the wind was stronger and the rain became heavier again. "Made it," said Mariana as she held the porch door open for Dylan. "I'm really sorry about everything you lost, your camping stuff, the rental truck, your phone." "You could hardly have expected the road would collapse. No one got hurt. Now we need to get out of these wet things and get warm." Dylan thought he saw a grin flash on Mariana's face. Mariana stepped out of her boots, took off her raincoat, and hung it on a hook. Everything she wore was soaked through and dripping, and the sensible thing would be to strip in the porch. Dylan, beside her, hung up the dripping kangaroo jacket, pulled off his sodden runners, and then turned to look out the porch window. She noted the muscles on his upper back, outlined under the shirt stuck to his skin. Lower down, his shorts stuck to his firm butt, feeding rivulets of water through the hair on his legs. She looked down at herself. Her shirt clung to her chest. We should strip everything off, he said. You go first. I won't look. Sure. She was too cold to disagree. There are towels on the shelf, so you can cover yourself with that before you come in. Just throw everything in a pile on the floor. We can squeeze them out over the sink and hang them to dry once we are dressed. Mariana stripped off everything except her panties and dumped the wet clothes in a pile on the floor, then wrapped a towel around herself. She looked up and confirmed that Dylan was still looking out the storm dark window. She caught his eyes in the glass. Were you watching my reflection? I swear not. Just checking the view. Outside, the rain. Once you come in, wait for me in the kitchen. I'll be right back. Mariana rushed upstairs. She peeled off the wet underwear, ran a towel over herself, and dressed. She returned to the kitchen to find Dylan lounging on a kitchen chair, a towel draped around his waist. His wallet was open on the kitchen table with credit cards and a handful of soaked $20 bills spread out beside it. His chest was as muscular as she'd imagined, finely patterned with black hair in a T pattern. He noticed her looking at him. Only fair, she said, since you were watching me change. I confess to seeing your bra, but only on the floor. I didn't think you were the lacy bra type. I hardly think you know me well enough to know my underwear. And it's probably best if things stay that way, but I can remove my towel if you're feeling shortchanged. He moved his hand to his waist. No, that's not necessary. Let's get you dressed. Follow me. Mariana led Dylan upstairs to the second bedroom. This is where you will sleep tonight, she said, surprising herself with how firmly she made that announcement. She waved him into the room, looking away, but catching his scent as he passed close to her. I put away all the lost and found clothes in that dresser. I don't keep underwear, but you could wear swim trunks or shorts for boxers. There are several pairs there. Now who's assuming underwear preferences? Excuse me. So the first thing I want to say about Castle Rock Campground, the campground in my story, is that it is fictional. And although it's located on the northern shore of Cape Breton Island, where the Meat Cove Campground is located, it is not Meat Cove Campground. People have asked me if I was thinking of Meat Cove. No, not really. The biggest difference is that Meat Cove is up on a cliff. Let's bring up a picture there so you can get a sense of what Meat Cove looks like. So it is a beautiful campground, but this is not what I imagined Castle Rock Campground to look like. Also, the Meat Cove Campground is run by a family and it's in a small village. Castle Rock Campground is completely isolated. I tried to make it clear that Castle Rock was not Meat Cove by making it east of Bay St. Lawrence instead of west. And there is apparently a road in that direction, but it's barely passable, and you can't go very far before you end up in the ocean. The geography of Castle Rock Campground is closer to Capstick, a tiny village halfway between Bay St. Lawrence and Meat Cove. So this is a little more what I imagine the campground looking like. But the campground itself, Castle Rock Campground, is a composite of various campgrounds in Atlantic Canada. For example, the fancy washrooms I described in the story are actually the washrooms in the new section of Yogi Bear's campground in Woodstock, New Brunswick. The rocky areas on the beach are inspired by the Ovens campground near Lunenburg. The stairs down to the beach are from a campground near Shediac, and so on. Another reason why people might think Meat Cove is the campground in the story is that the road to Meat Cove did wash out in a heavy rainstorm during the summer of 2010, around the same time I started working on Ocean's Lure. So obviously, I figured a road washout was a fair thing to put in the story. In that washout, about 100 residents and tourists were stranded behind multiple washed out bridges. Supplies went in by boat, and tourists left that way. Later in the novel, our couple encounter an abandoned and destroyed resort. And this was somewhat inspired by the Apostogan Spa. The Aspotogan Sea Spa was a luxury hotel built by a German family. This is about an hour from Halifax on St. Margaret's Bay. Back in 1992, they started building this 5-story, 130-room luxury resort hotel on 300 acres. This was a project that was almost $40 million. The exterior was finished in 1994. There was a big grand opening party, and then everything stopped. The owners ran out of money. The interior was never completed. Lots of contractors never got paid, and some went out of business. In 1996, a couple of Halifax developers picked up the property for a little over $500,000. They tried to sell it as a hotel, but years went by, the property was vandalized, and the structure was torn down in 2015 after standing empty and incomplete for 10 years. This photo is from about halfway through the demolition process. The structure was about 3 times the size shown here. The land is now being developed as a residential subdivision. What I'd like to do now is talk about my work in progress. It has the working title Cover Charm, which I'm not crazy about, so it'll probably change. My hero, Derek, is a model, and he's famous for an underwear advertising campaign. But he also does romance novel covers, and he even strips for stag and doe parties. As the story opens, he's just lost his main modeling contract and all his money, thanks to a crooked manager. He hires Susan, a divorced mother of 2, an artist, and a web designer, to make a website for him so that he can sell merchandise with his photos. And they end up collaborating on creating romance novel covers. Neither is looking for romance, and they fight mutual attraction partly because it's a business relationship, and partly because neither of them think they are good enough for the other. Then Susan's ex-mother-in-law brings the children to Susan's apartment early and surprises Susan and Derek at a romance cover photo session where they are working with 2 other models for the very steamy cover of a threesome romance. The ex-mother-in-law is so shocked by this that she goes to court to take Susan's children away. So in the scene I'm going to read you, Susan is visiting her lawyer after learning of this court filing. Jose Randell looked up from his notepad. It seems to me like a simple misunderstanding. Your landlord might claim you are running a business, but unless it's a business where you have customers coming to the apartment all day, every day, the tenancy board is usually going to let it go. Basically, you had a few guests over for the afternoon. It wasn't disruptive, certainly not a court matter. No, I'm not worried about the landlord, said Susan. There's a guy running a retail furniture business for foreign students on another floor, and they've never done anything about that, even though there have been complaints. So what happened after your mother-in-law and the kids arrived? Asked Jose. I explained what we were doing. Well, actually, first I put a top on. Then I explained. My mother-in-law left and the kids went to their room to do homework. Jose made a few notes. Were they early? Yes. Russell was supposed to take them to dinner, but he canceled. Did he let you know? No. Jose made a few more notes. And after that, everything was fine? It seemed that way. We were done taking pictures. Everyone helped me move the bed back into the bedroom, and then everyone left. Nothing happened the rest of the week. Then, when I took the kids to Russell's Friday afternoon, he said he wasn't feeling well and asked me not to stay the night. Jose looked up. Yes, you've mentioned that, to keep the kids company. Yes, I know, said Susan. I'd rather not discuss that now. Saturday morning, I got this by courier. That's when I called you. Susan stacked the stack of papers Jose had already leafed through. He picked them up and looked at them again. Susan looked around the office. It had not changed since she had taken pictures for his website several years ago. The large window behind his desk still said Art Randall and Sons, established 1927, in a flowing script. To Susan, the business name sounded more like a hardware store than a law office, but when she pointed that out to him, he did not want to change. Tradition, Jose said, just like that film with the Jewish guy. Jose also did not like that the new naming rules meant that he would have to append law office to the name if he changed it. He pointed out that with the existing name, he could offer any services if he got tired of being a lawyer. Meanwhile, he paid her a couple of $100 a month to ghostwrite his legal blog. He would make a few notes on recent cases, and she would write a complete article. I have good news and bad news, said Jose. First, the good news. This will never hold up in court. Even the most conservative judge is not going to believe there was an orgy happening. No one was fully dressed, but no one was completely undressed either, apparently, and apparently there was no sexual activity witnessed. There was none going on, of course. Your photos and sketches are evidence to support your story if we need to go that far. Jose checked his notes. You were going to paint covers and post them for sale on Derek's website. Did that get done? Do you have contracts for these romance novel covers? I'm not sure about the contracts, said Susan. Derek handles everything with the artists, and my only contract with him is for the website. I guess we should do something about that. But several of the covers were commissions, and 3 of the on-spec have sold. There's records for that. Susan had been happily surprised at the speed of the sales and the amount Derek had charged. Derek had reminded her that despite the saying, don't judge a book by its cover, the cover image can do a lot to promote books on social media, websites, and store shelves. That's good too, said Jose. Nothing illegal or immoral happening, just business. A judge might consider the posing inappropriate for children, but your mother-in-law surprised you. She should have called or at least knocked before using the kid's key. We might even suggest your mother-in-law or Russell had some idea of what was going on. Is that possible? The kids might have said something about Derek. Okay, said Jose. That's actually good. But let's talk about the bad news. Susan was worried. My kids aren't coming home anytime soon, are they? The emergency protective order is clear on that. We can request a hearing to get it reviewed, but since there's already a hearing scheduled for the motion to change the custody order, the courts may just defer to that. Also, it is not a no contact order. You can still communicate by phone, email, text, whatever the kids these days are using. Have you been able to do that? Yes, I talked to them Sunday night, said Susan. We kept it light. Since they'd normally spend this week with him anyway, I didn't say anything about this. Good. But since you are talking to them and they normally spend lots of time with Russell already, it will be hard to argue that getting the emergency order removed is urgent. I think we're going to need to wait for that custody review. It's a few weeks, but I'm sure this will be thrown out then. Susan had never been apart from the kids for that long, but accepted that Jose was right. She needed to be patient. Thanks. What do I do to prepare for the custody hearing? I'll take care of it. I just need the name of Derek's website. Susan wrote it down on his pad of paper. Thanks. Is there anything on that site that is not safe for work or might look bad in court? It's a male model site, so it's a little, racy, but there's no nudity. Same with the covers. And the relationship between you and Derek is strictly business? Jose waited for an answer. Your lawyer is like your doctor. For me to help you, you need to tell me everything. Of course, it's in the strictest confidence. Susan nodded. We're trying to keep it a business relationship, but we're having a little trouble with that. And the kids have seen you and Derek together? Yes, we did some photos together, all of us, the kids too. They're for family humor novels, not romance. I can show you the completed covers. Susan pulled out her phone and showed Jose the cover images. Jose looked at them, made a few notes, then sighed. Susan, you and Russell have been smart to stay out of court so far. Going to court is always risky. Sometimes judges don't read everything. Sometimes they make assumptions. Sometimes they had a fight with their spouse that morning over breakfast and they just want to punish everyone. So here's what might happen at the hearing. Russell will say you were dating a bisexual male stripper. He's getting out of the stripping. At court, you can't interrupt. And if you do, you'll annoy the judge. The judge will hear that Derek is a bisexual male stripper and that you have exposed the kids to his sordid lifestyle. Then Russell, or rather his lawyer, will say you have forced the children to participate in photo sessions with this pervert. They'll suggest your apartment is a den of iniquity compared with Russell's wholesome home with his parents. But none of that is true. At least it's misleading and discriminatory. Yes, it is, but that's what we're up against. Are you telling me that I need to stop working with Derek? Asked Susan. No, no, you said it's a working relationship, and since your income is erratic, and that's something else the court will consider as a strike against you, it's good that you have a client that keeps you busy. And I'm not going to tell you how to live your personal life. If you want to be involved with someone like Derek, that's your business. But if you have anything other than a business relationship with Derek, it needs to be discreet, very discreet. Even meeting up for dinner to discuss the work you were doing could be misinterpreted. And remember, Halifax is a small town, so you don't need to tell me that. One other thing while I'm giving warnings. Jose got up, walked around the front of his desk by Susan's chair, and rested against his desk. Since there's no visit order in place, you should not meet up with Russell under any circumstances. If he contacts you for any reason, tell him or his lawyer that they need to contact me. This is his mother's doing, not his, said Susan. Perhaps, we don't know that for sure, but either way, don't talk with him or meet him. Are you telling me to stop sleeping with Russell? Because that's over. Jose looked down. I'm glad to hear that. But since the courts are getting involved now, that's for the best. You know, if you're looking for company, you might consider a lonely married man. They'd be discreet, something to think about. Jose straightened up, patted Susan's shoulder, and walked back around his desk. She recoiled from his touch, recalling a previous occasion or two where he'd been too friendly. But she couldn't afford to hire a new lawyer. She stood up and shook his hand across the desk. Thanks for the advice. What do I owe you for this so far? Well, let's call it a free consultation for now. Remember, call the kids regularly, but say as little as possible about the legal issues. Good luck and congratulations on selling the artwork. My wife loves those little romance books. So that's the introduction of the lawyer. In that passage, we have several inside jokes about Nova Scotia bureaucracy. And of course, family court ends up playing an important role in this plot. I've been involved with family court for 15 years, so I'm obviously using that as grist for the mill. Susan's lawyer, Jose, he started out as a nice guy in the first draft, but during revisions, he became rather sleazy. And later in the story, he's an obstacle to the relationship between Susan and Derek. I needed to have some forced proximity between Susan and Derek, so I sent them on a road trip to Ontario to visit his mother. I needed a reason for the trip, so his mother falls and breaks her arm. My mother fell and broke her arm a couple of years ago, and I used my mother's understandable bad attitude about having a broken arm to give Derek's mother a bad attitude. But then I made Derek's mother just an all-round nasty person, which meant I had to reassure my mother that the broken arm is all she has in common with Derek's mother. Family reconciliation is often a part of romance novels, part of the optimistic ending of everything working out in relationships. I did that in Ocean's Lure, where Mariana learned something about her late father that makes her feel more kindly towards him. And I do a similar thing in Cover Charm, where Derek learns something that makes him feel better about his late father. But I like to balance all this family friendliness with a little bit of unpleasant perhaps reality. So in Ocean's Lure, Mariana also learns some unpleasant things about her late grandmother. And in Cover Charm, Derek's mother is mean. Here's the scene where they pick her up at the hospital. This is when Susan meets her for the first time. Susan wasn't sure what to expect when they met his mom at the hospital. Derek had warned her, but she couldn't be that bad, surely. His mother was surprised to see Derek walking over from Susan's van, but jumped up and greeted him as soon as she noticed him. Susan got out of the van and waited by the passenger door. Derek clearly got his looks from his mom. Like him, she was tall and thin, with long fingers extending past a sling for her arm. However, her gray hair was pulled back into a long braid that reached halfway down her back. She was wearing stretched jeans, a black t-shirt with a faded and unreadable design, and a beaded necklace. She looked like an aging hippie and hardly a person to hold conservative or homophobic views. Susan remembered what Derek had said about not judging a book by its cover. He waved her over. Mom, I'd like you to meet Susan. She helped me drive out here, and that's her van. Susan, this is my mom. His mother turned to Susan and put on blue plastic rimmed glasses that had been hanging from a second beaded chain around her neck. Huh, call me Brenda. She met Susan's eyes with a mixture of surprise and wariness, then she turned back to Derek. Why are you using her van? Where's your car? I don't have one right now. Remember, I told you I lost the modeling job and the car as well? Oh, I'm not surprised. Not a real job. You know they need roofers here? That's good, honest work. We can talk lots at home. I'm going to be visiting for a few days to make sure you are okay after your fall and give you a chance to heal. He reached for her good arm. We're in the hospital pickup zone, so let's get you picked up and home. Susan noted Derek's patience. It took you long enough to get here. It's too hot, and you wouldn't believe how much pain I'm in. Brenda let Derek guide her over to the van and helped her into the front passenger seat. Susan got into a rear seat. David got into the driver's seat and started the drive back to his mother's house. Why didn't you bring my car here? Brenda asked Derek. I'm not sure where you keep your keys, or even if you had left the keys at the house. Besides, the van was parked behind the car in the driveway. Brenda turned to look at Susan. Why are you letting him drive your van? You're not one of those women who thinks the man always has to drive. He's not even a real man, for God's sake. Mom, I just got here. Susan interrupted. I certainly think he's a real man. She wondered if his mother would assume too much from that, but she had to say something. Derek was focusing on the road. Brenda turned to look at Susan. Really? Huh. Maybe I'll have grandkids yet. You have kids? Susan nodded. 2, 6 and 8. Girls or boys or one of each? Though with kids these days, it doesn't seem to make any damn difference. I thought I had a boy and I was disappointed. Well, at least yours are young. Enjoy them while you can. My only child here has refused to visit for years. I'm not surprised, thought Susan. Brenda gave Susan another appraising look. You look like a mother, but I didn't think you were that old. How did you meet my son? Was it one of those online dating app things? Derek answered. Susan's a talented website designer and an artist. I hired her to assist me with some projects, so we are business partners and friends. Oh, if you hired her, you're not partners. She's your employee. You've just got no sense for business, just like your idiot father. Susan hoped they'd be back at the house soon, where she could plead needing a nap or a walk. Derek seemed unfazed, but she had a new appreciation for why he had moved out as soon as he could. So they're at Derek's mother's house for several days. This is in a small town near Ottawa. And they spend a lot of time together, avoiding his mother by going for walks or to movies and doing mundane couple things like buying groceries. A lot of relationship building here. They spend a lot of time together, but since they are staying with Derek's mother in separate bedrooms, there's no intimacy beyond kisses, and they are both unsure about going any further. Then they need to rush back to Halifax when her court hearing date is moved up. On that trip, everything that can go wrong on a long drive does go wrong, and they end up at a little roadside motel in New Brunswick, not unlike several places I've stayed. I never have any trouble getting a room, but for Derek and Susan, it turns out that their only option is a delightfully cheesy honeymoon suite with, of course, only one bed. Well, I hope to have Cover Charm completed this fall. So that is our half hour. I thank you very much for joining me this evening. Any questions? Well, as I say, thanks again for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the reading, and I hope Cover Charm is out this fall, hopefully with a better title, and that you enjoy reading it. Thank you very much, and have a good night. Bye-bye.